There was a building inspector who accidentally found what looked like a Chinese biolab in California. This was like in, one of the small towns like Fresno area, right? Sorry, in Kinney County, which is like it's like farmland. It's one of the bread baskets of America. And what it was is it was a giant windowless warehouse that was on the back of a recycling facility. The lady, I interviewed her. I did a special feature on it. The lady goes and knocks on the door. She found like a fire hose sticking out the back. She thought she was going to find a bunch of homeless people living in there. She knocks on the door, and a bunch of Chinese guys wearing like lab gear, like full lab gear, open the door. And she's like, what the heck? Like, what is this? And first she's like, okay, maybe it's some farming thing because they're farm country. And sometimes you find farmers wear stuff like that. I don't know why the heck they do it, but I guess it's not too unusual. They let her in. She starts seeing like just weird, like boxes stacked to the ceiling, like all kinds of crazy stuff. And they walk further in, and just this stench hits her. And she said they had just cages and cages of like these lab rats. And she's like, well, what the heck are these? And like, oh, we do experiments on them. She's like, what do you experiment with them? They're like, oh, we don't know. Other people do the experiments on them. And she starts seeing there's like refrigerators with like vials of like liquid. She's like, what the heck did I just stumble onto? They launch an investigation. The place ends up getting raided. Long story short, there were rumors that there were like vials of Ebola. They had all these live viruses, just, live COVID. They had live COVID-19. They had HIV, like all kinds of stuff. Eventually, the whole thing kind of gets thrown out. The whole thing just disappears. One of the guys is facing charges for like just, slap on the wrist type stuff, not just like misregistering stuff. It's not like he got charged with any of this. And what happened is the media came out and they said, oh, it was just a big rumor. There was no Ebola there. There was nothing really dangerous there. Forget about it. Let me tell you what I found. It turns out the FDA never even investigated. The USDA, they never investigated. They never tested the vials. They don't even know what was in there. Apparently, there are no regulations in the United States for privately run virus labs. You can buy if you create if you want to create a virus lab, you register it. You can start buying lab mice, humanized mice for like $2-3 each. You can buy lab mice. There's no regulations on testing anything with them. You can do anything you want to them. You can buy live viruses. You can inject them into the lab mice. You can do this in your garage, and there's no regulations. And what ended up happening is the whole Ebola thing. It was a refrigerator of a bunch of unlabeled vials, and they had a piece of paper that had Ebola written on it, which would have been a weapon of mass destruction, right? Defined as. They never even tested the vials. They don't even know what was in them. They destroyed them without even testing them, because the FDA, under the regulations, apparently, unless they're clearly labeled, they can't test them. And so they had handwritten labels. They had a coding system of numbers, and it was like they couldn't decode it, so they didn't know what any of the vials were. They had some that were written in Chinese. None of them were tested. To this day, they don't even know what was in that place. And basically what happened is the local county, and this is a small town in America, Kinney County, farming town. They don't have a lot of money. They had to spend taxpayer dollars to destroy the vials, to bring in a private, lab company to destroy it, because they didn't want the place like becoming like a biohazard. The FDA didn't help them at all. They didn't help with any of that. And so all the evidence was destroyed. And so that's what really happened at that lab.
And is that just that there were Chinese people who worked there, or is this run by a Chinese corporation, or what?
So what happened is you had an individual who he was like a known con artist. He was on the run from the law from Canada, And basically, he was running a business where they were creating COVID test kits and pregnancy test kits and things like that. And they were mislabeling the boxes is what the crime they ended up getting charged with, right? They were buying these test kits and they were like reboxing them and saying made in America when they were like from somewhere else. And it seemed like what they were trying to do was have these viruses, I guess, to create COVID test kits, you have to infect mice with COVID and then take it out of part of the mice and then like inject the live virus onto the test kit. And there's some whole process to it that you make these test kits. They were trying to manufacture test kits. And who knows whatever the heck they were doing with all the other stuff. It was never really brought out or properly explained. But the guy, he was trying to get like, COVID money from the government basically because they have these handouts. And then the CCP apparently also has this whole system where they just fund virus labs and virus experiments and so on too. So there's a lot of money there that you have all these people trying to get in on that market to get in on because there's money there. The individual had kind of indirect ties to the CCP. Through him, there were ties to Chinese front organizations. There were ties to the Chinese military. There were ties to the Little Red schools, which are kind of like Confucius Institute type schools being run, I believe in Nevada, actually. So it was a lot of like indirect stuff, not on him per se, but through his network and through investors and other people who are involved with it, where you did have all these like united front ties. And when Congress, they did have a hearing on it. That was one of the big accusations. What was that there was all these united front ties to that place. But again, because there's no regulations, it's like they didn't really violate laws other than being accused of mislabeling boxes.
So what you're saying is that if we need to raise money for China Unscripted, we could get funding from China to start a biolab in like a garage or a bunker under the Empire State Building, and there's no regulation about that.
No regulation. It's big money. No regulation and big money.
There's a problem with that. You ever read Flowers to Algernon?
Flowers for Algernon?
Yeah.
Yes.
I would bond with all the humanized mice.
That's the main problem.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to inject them with Ebola. But yeah, I imagine that would cause a very uncomfortable situation for the Biden administration that has, for the past year been so eager to restore communication, people-to-people communication with China. If suddenly it came out, there was this weird, sketchy lab that had Ebola, which is, as you mentioned, could be a weapon of mass destruction. So thank goodness those tests didn't happen.
That was one of the things that I heard people expressing is that they felt the whole thing got swept under the rug because of the implications it would have had. But it's just people speculating. So take it for what it's worth, But the whole thing was wild. It was crazy investigating that.